I'm Todd Gibson with ProVia, and today we're going to cover measuring entry doors. Now online we have a chart here that can help you out a lot with determining what is a standard size for us. And in that chart that you can look at, it'll give you the standard sizes for all the different dimensions that we're going to talk about here, and it's what we produce entry doors to. So you can very easily determine whether the door you're measuring is going to be a standard size door or a custom size door. First, we're going to look at rabbet to rabbet opening size. Rabbet to rabbet opening size is the dimension inside the pocket of the jamb from this rabbet to this rabbet. When you're doing this, you take 3 measurements, and then from those 3 measurements, you would take the lesser of that, and that's the size that you would use to plug in the chart. That's a pretty easy thing to get to. Next thing we want to check is the height of the door. Now, if we're doing a rabbet-to-rabbet measurement, the rabbet-to-rabbet opening height is described from the inside portion of this frame here to where the threshold is going to sit in the opening. So discerning where the threshold is going to sit is difficult. This one's pretty easy. So you've got several different floor applications that you're going to be working with. One of them might be this oak threshold. So if there's a solid oak threshold on the outside of this, perhaps in an older building, then when your installers come, they're going to remove that. The idea is you have to determine where the floor is going to be, or approximately where the floor is going to be, after we remove this and build material back in. Now once that's exposed, your installer is going to take a piece of material and build this in and finish this. When this is done, this is where the threshold is going to sit. Now, this is complicated in measuring because you may have floor coverings in here that are different heights, and they may be stacked from years and years of changing things over time. So what we want to do is look at the different floor heights. If you had a subfloor here with a laminate floor, over top of it a floating floor, you could be coming up in height higher than where your threshold is. The thing to keep in mind here is our threshold height. Our threshold height is 1.25 inches tall. So when you're looking at our threshold height in finality, this is exactly what you're going to be looking at. It's going to be inside this jamb, 1.25 inches tall, and then you have to determine where that floor is going to be from here. So if you kind of have an idea where that threshold is going to sit and where this threshold height is going to come to, we need to allow this door to open and close without contacting the floor or maybe even a throw rug on the inside of here. If that's a concern, then we need to address it when we're sizing our door system. So keeping in mind that this is 1.25 inches tall, you can always, if you want to maintain a 1/2 inch of opening from the top of this threshold to the surface of the floor, you'll just have to take the measurement from the floor to the rabbet, add 3/4 inch to it, and then you'll have where your threshold is going to sit for this opening. Now, what we want you to do is then reference back to these wonderful numbers, and then you can determine whether you're going to need a custom size door or a standard size door to fit this opening. The other thing to keep in mind when you're doing this is if you're stepping up into this opening like this, you're going to have to step over it. If we're going to raise this threshold up in the opening to have clearance on the floor, we have to consider how much rise we have there. That could be a problem for a customer, especially an elderly customer. So if we go beyond 7.5 inches, you're going to have trouble getting in and out of that door. In addition to that, if we want to take a standard size door and put in this opening, and all we're going to do is raise the door up, so when your installers are installing it, they'd use a standard size door, build that up so your threshold's higher than that opening, than your floor covering. Then they have to make sure that they have room in the header of this thing to raise it up. If we don't have room in the header, or there's a lintel or brick on the exterior, those things cause problems. So determining height here is very important. Now we can look at unit size. Unit size for us is the outside of this jamb to the outside of this jamb, and from the outside of the jamb here to where the threshold is going to sit. Now we talked about rabbet opening size beginning. because that's where people are going to be most able to get that dimension. When you're talking about unit size, you're probably going to have to remove trim to see that unit size for sure. And if you think that there's something in here that might be a problem, then you really need to see what's behind there. From that perspective, then we're back to rough opening size, which we're usually not concerned with in replacement products. But if there's something going to be back there, it's going to be encroaching into the rough opening. We want to make sure we can clarify that. Now, rough opening is nothing more than from stud to stud and from the stud to wherever the floor or the deck is going to be. Like I said, that's not a measurement we concern ourselves with replacement product. Now, when we want to move on to this, the next thing we're going to talk about is jamb depth. So jamb depth is from the exterior trim point to the interior trim point, or the wall thickness, either one of those things. Now, when we talk about taking that measurement, what we'd like to do is not be too fine. When you get this wall thickness, then we can go ahead and transition to ordering the product. What we want to do is make sure we don't do it too fine. We don't want to measure this and give us a dimension that's going to be dead on what the jamb is in the product. We're going to give the installers a little bit of an advantage here because the walls in this house are never true. They're never on plane. The installer's job is to take this jamb and this jamb and put it on the same geometric plane. We can help them a little bit by rounding up on this jamb depth. So give them a little more. If it's on a 16th, round up to the 1/8. If there's something really crazy going on like plaster, perhaps maybe you need a little more than that, maybe just 1/8 of an inch up. Talk to your installers about that and see what they'd like you to do for adjustment, and we can make their job a little bit easier and make the finished product nicer. What we want to have happen is when we put the trim back on this house, we want the trim to come up to the frame very nicely on the inside. If this jamb depth is a little too shallow, it's going to be running away perhaps from this trim and give us a gap, and that can be a customer complaint. We can also help our installers by giving a little more jamb depth when it's a brick opening. In that brick opening, you have an existing piece of trim on the exterior of the house that is caulked to the brick. And when they do that, they leave a caulk line. So you tear the brick mold out, you have an existing caulk line on the brick, and we're going to try to cover that. So we're going to add a little bit to the jamb depth to push that brick mold to the outside to cover that. If you add 3/8 of an inch, the installer knows that, then they can trim the opening out when they're preparing it 3/8 of an inch. That brick mold will come in and set up against the wall, but the brick mold will be out covering that, so they don't have to spend 20 or 30 minutes trying to prep that opening just to have a nice clean caulk line. Now, the final measurement we need to get here is exterior trim to exterior trim. It's what we call brick mold to brick mold size. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be brick mold. It can be flat stock trim. But we're going to take this dimension from the outside of the trim to the outside of the trim. Now, keep in mind that this is not a measurement that we use to order doors by. This is a measurement of exterior trim only. And we can customize this trim to the size of the home, so it makes it much easier for your installer when they get to the job site. And gives you a much cleaner and more professional looking job. Now, when we're measuring this, taking brick in consideration, brick is not usually even on either side. So we have to concern ourselves with the width of this opening. And when you give us the width of this opening from this brick to this brick, you're going to measure in a couple different places. Take the smallest of those, and you're going to pare that measurement back and give us the exact size of the trim that you want on this unit. So you're responsible for the cutback on trim. We're not going to cut it back. You give us a dimension, that's the dimension we're going to send you. So from one side to the other, whether it's flat stock material, 5/4, or brick mold profile, we're going to customize your exterior trim. The door can be standard, the trim will not be standard. And you can use that by checking on the documentation we spoke of earlier. And you can also then customize the head height of the brick mold trim. So take a measurement from where the threshold is going to sit here to your lintel in this situation, and then give us that dimension, use your cutback, and then we will go ahead and make this trim fit your opening. Any trim that we measure, and if you're buying our cladding system with it, the cladding will automatically cover anything that you order from us. Now we're going to look at measuring brick mold to brick mold size in J-channel. Now, whenever you do this, keep in mind again, we're going to give you the exact size that you ship us. And measuring brick mold to brick mold size does not give you any dimension that you can order the door by. So this is exterior trim. When you're measuring this trim, you're going to measure from the outside of the trim here to the outside of the trim here in between the J-channels. And then you're going to measure from the header, the top of the trim, to where the threshold is going to sit down below. With that said, let's go back up the top here and look at this very quickly. And you can see that the edge of this trim, the sides, is wider than the header. That's the type of thing that we can customize for you, so your guys aren't having to customize it in the field. So let us help you out if we can. Keep in mind, whenever we do this, we're going to clad it to whatever size it is. We don't include the cladding in the sizing. So make sure that you cut back enough to get in between here and it fits. If this unit measures out 42 inches and you send us 42 inches, it's not going to fit. So you're in charge of the cutbacks. When you reference this document online, it's going to give you our standard sizes. And the basic things that we've covered here will help you measure a single door. But these also apply to French doors and to door and side light units. Working with the rabbet to rabbet opening size and really converting it to the unit size, either way, this chart will help you, because then you can precisely order the door to the size you wish or order a standard size door. Thank you for watching today. For more information on measuring or installation and service, please visit us at ProVia.com.